The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
We have a governor and legislature focused on protecting their own party.
Tonight on Politics Now, Sheriff Joe Lombardo starts his run for governor. We're going to break down his announcement. Plus,
we need to put some money into this, create an organization that acts as a central belly button, and force all these other government agencies to start cooperating.
The government investigation into UFOs. Our own George Knapp breaks down what is and isn't in a new congressional report. And this.
Infrastructure is very important because we have to import everything. We don't make anything except maybe dreams come true.
On Capitol Hill, will an infrastructure bill ever get passed? We look at the latest maneuverings in Congress.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you for joining us on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. Vice President Kamala Harris is in Las Vegas this week. She was scheduled to speak at the Carpenters Union earlier today at Sunset and Valley View down in Henderson. We have some video from her last visit here in March. There you see it. Part of the Biden administration's promotion of the American Rescue Plan. Now, her speech was taped after when we taped this show. We will have the latest for you, of course, at 8newsnow.com. But the big news in politics this week, Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo finally made it official. He is running for governor. The I-Team's David Charnes was at the campaign kickoff this week, David, and let's break down what was a pretty big decision and a pretty big announcement.
Yeah, we sort of knew it was coming, right?
Very much so.
But this is the official mark here. The speech was over at Rancho High School, where Lombardo himself graduated from several decades ago. He is a Republican, of course, and it was very clear that the backbone of this campaign was that he plans to run as the law and order candidate. Take a listen.
What we currently have is we have a paradigm, or we have a sense up in Carson City, that we're more concerned with felons' rights, lessening penalties associated with crime, and handcuffing the police. And that's a paradigm, or that's a program that just doesn't breed success into the future. We have to change that. We have to be more objective in how we look at that. Yes, police reform is needed, and I appreciate that, and we have looked at that, but it's acting too fast. We've created an environment where the police are handcuffed and have an inability to do their job.
It's interesting to hear him say that because as sheriff, he's been pretty open about the idea of police reform and being somewhat supportive of some of the measures that his own department has already put into place. But he's trying to set himself apart clearly from Governor Steve Sisolak. We know the sheriff has a long career in law enforcement here in the Valley. What did he say about other important issues in Nevada when it comes to maybe education?
Well, he sort of adopted the positions you can expect from anyone who is going to run for the Republican nomination. Yeah. He is, of course, well, he says he is the conservative candidate in this race. He is for school choice, which is the program that takes money and gives students to go to private schools instead, and is also for training programs for trade.
Our governor opposes school choice and has failed to provide a plan to reduce class size. As governor, I will block any attempt to force critical race theory on our public school children. We can teach our children to respect each other and treat everyone with dignity. We must bring back a focus on trades so Nevada can attract good-paying manufacturing jobs, and we must do a better job of keeping our best and brightest right here in Nevada.
So he's kind of hinting a little bit about some economic issues when he talks about education and trade jobs. But what about the economy? What about addressing those issues?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because, this is his campaign announcement. He said right at the start, no new taxes. That was his pledge there, promising to veto any new taxes that could come his way.
We have a governor and legislature focused on protecting their own party, guaranteeing single-party rule so they can introduce state income tax, raise your property taxes, and advance public policy that would make Bernie Sanders blush.
Well, former Lieutenant Governor Mark Hutchison introduced and endorsed Lombardo at Rancho High School. So the sheriff has some political leaders lining up behind him, but North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee has also said that he is running for governor. Former Senator Dean Heller, Mark Amodei up north, they've been considering the same race. They're dipping their toe in the water a little bit. Anything that you've heard so far that sort of separates this pack of Republicans as they're looking up to line up against Governor Sisolak?
So the answer is not really. One line of attack that may take on Lombardo is that he stopped cooperating with immigration officials after a court ruling. So he left what's called the 287G program and led to a whole thing about then President Trump calling Las Vegas a sanctuary city for a little bit. By the way, he said he would take an endorsement from the president when I asked him about it, but he said that he wasn't seeking it out. He made that sort of clear. I said, are you seeking out the nomination?
Yeah.
He said, I'm not seeking it, but I would take it.
It's a fine line, and it's still very early in the governor's race. We're still a long ways out. Governor Steve Sisolak hasn't really criticized his opponents yet. He certainly knows the sheriff and John Lee very well from being down here in Southern Nevada. Last week, Governor Sisolak told me he expected the main lines of attack against him to be focused on the pandemic.
It's easy to sit back and be a Monday morning quarterback, when you come to these situations. This state faced a pandemic that if it comes once in a century.
Now you can watch interviews that we've had with Governor Sisolak and North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee on 8 News Now, including the discussion you had with Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Governor candidate Joe Lombardo.
There you go.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
Now, Governor Sisolak met with President Joe Biden this week, part of the Western Governors Association meeting. They talked about trying to prevent wildfires and working with the climate and energy strategy, and included a roadmap initiative to include more infrastructure for electric vehicles, trying to get some of that down the line. Now, switching gears here, the rise in coronavirus cases in Clark County has Governor Sisolak asking for the federal government for more help. He wants FEMA to set up vaccination sites again here in Nevada. This comes as Clark County currently has the highest number of daily cases in the entire U.S. and a stalled rate of vaccinations. A growing number of those cases are that Delta variant. It's more contagious. The health district is sticking with current CDC recommendations, so face masks are not mandated right now. We spoke with the Southern Nevada Health District, which has its focus on increasing the vaccination rate.
We consider that it's very important for us to emphasize the need for vaccination for those people who have not received the vaccine, because most of the hospitalizations and deaths that we are seeing today in Clark County are from people who are not vaccinated.
So here is specifically what the governor has requested: more testing sites, a more expansive Get Out the Vaccine campaign, and coming up with a workplace vaccination program, all to try and get more people the coronavirus vaccine. Another delay in the execution of Zane Floyd. This week, a federal judge ruled Floyd's attorneys need more time to investigate the drugs that would be used in the process, so there'll be a delay. The drug cocktail Nevada's Department of Corrections plans to use for this execution has never been tried. Floyd murdered 4 people at a local Albertsons back in 1999. State prison officials had been tight-lipped about what drugs they were going to use until this judge ordered them to reveal it. The execution was scheduled for later this month, but now it won't be until October 18th if it happens at all. Nevada has not executed a prisoner since 2004. President Joe Biden hit the road this week to pitch his latest infrastructure plan. The new bipartisan proposal is $973 billion. Most of the 1 million jobs created in the plan would go to workers without a college degree. However, the bipartisan measure quickly fell into disarray. The president said he would only sign it if Democrats also passed their own separate infrastructure bill focused on social and family welfare. Well, President Biden later clarified that wasn't a veto threat, but Republicans still pushed back.
He gets an agreement with Republicans and Democrats on infrastructure, and then minutes later, he blows the whole thing up by cutting a side deal with Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, trying to appease the most radical elements of his base.
The president looks forward to signing each bill. He's long supported the two-track approach, and his view is that the American people are most interested in what we're going to do to deliver for them.
Republican leaders have not said whether they plan to support the bipartisan legislation en masse. Nevada Democratic Congresswoman Dina Titus sits on the committee currently hearing that bill. She says the second proposal may have to all be passed in different parts.
You've got Wi-Fi that you need to expand in areas that aren't served, and Wi-Fi is the electricity of today. It's essential for education, for business, for medicine, so that's part of it. And then we'll do a bigger package that looks at human infrastructure, whether it's child care or expanding Medicare, and I want to see all of those pass. It may be in 2 different vehicles, but now's the time to go big, go bold, or go home. I don't see this as an expenditure, but rather as an investment.
So far, a vote has not been scheduled on the infrastructure bill or the human infrastructure bill referenced. Both senators and all three congresspeople from here in Southern Nevada, they're all Democrats. They do support those measures. Coming up next on Politics Now, investigating UFOs.
There needs to be a tremendous amount of government resources put into this.
Up next, we hear from former Senator Harry Reid and our own George Knapp about the big takeaways from a government report.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Advanced technology and close calls highlight a Pentagon report, a new one on UFOs. An executive summary was made public a week ago. The focus of this report, it's pretty narrow, just recent military encounters with unknown objects from 2004 to 2021. There were 144 cases, including the famous Tic Tac encounter. That's the video you're seeing right now. 18 of the cases exhibited unusual flight characteristics. Former Nevada Senator Harry Reid was the person who got the ball rolling.
Senator, so it's finally out, an underwhelming 9 pages, at least the public version of the report. What's your initial impressions?
Well, the government has acknowledged that they don't know what these unidentified flying objects are. And so when I started talking about this years ago, people made fun of me, and even my own staff thought I was crazy in talking about it. But in hindsight, I'm glad I did. Certainly, we now know that they have 142 sightings. We know there have been more than that. But it's something that, as far as I'm concerned, this is a preliminary report. And I mean preliminary. There needs to be a tremendous amount of government resources put into this. So we better understand it so it's not some kind of a fringe part of what government's doing. They've got to dive into this, because we and the American people are entitled to know what the hell's going on.
Well, we went straight to the expert to ask about the report. You just saw him, George Knapp of the Mr. Wire and the I-Team.
They don't give a lot of specifics. They have broad numbers, but no specific cases. We can guess what they are. The numbers are interesting. 144 cases that the U.S. Navy Office of Naval Intelligence analyzed, and 143 of those 144 cases remain unidentified. They said more than half of those cases have multiple sensor systems that were involved that confirmed it was a real physical object. It's not a cloud, it's not a bird, it's something real that's flying around. They were very cautious in their approach. They're not saying these are aliens. They don't mention extraterrestrials. They really don't know what they are, but the bulk of them are really interesting, and some of them are super interesting in that there were 11 cases where the pilots had near mid-air collisions with physical objects, which would have been a disaster. There were 18 of these cases where whatever these things are, they demonstrated remarkable technical capabilities. I mean, they demonstrated really incredible speeds, maneuverability that is beyond anything we've got. So at a minimum, it's interesting. If it is Chinese or Russian technology, that's a really big deal. I mean, if the Tic Tac incident, that video we've all seen from 2004, if that thing had a Chinese decal slapped on top of it, it would be a serious national security matter. So they admit, we don't have enough evidence to rule out foreign technology. We don't have enough proof to rule out that it could be some sort of secret American technology from special access program. But they asked a whole long list of agencies, hey, are these yours? And the answer was no. So it's a real shift for the Pentagon to put out even this limited report that says this is a legitimate mystery. It is a national security matter. It is a concern for aerospace safety. So we should look into it.
It just stirs up more questions, and is it at a point now where there are no answers left? Is this all the military has to give?
No, not by a long shot. There was a report that was given to Congress behind closed doors, a classified version of this report that's 9 times larger. We know from some of the stories that we've leaked, the leaks that we've had and the stories we produced, that they have visual evidence, that they have visual images, video shot by their Navy Viper teams on these ships that indicate these are some kind of craft. The USS Omaha, now there are 3 different videos released from that. First, you have the thermal image of this sphere, this big 6 foot in diameter, at least, sphere that followed right along this U.S. Navy warship for more than an hour. And then there's radar images that shows there were as many as 14 of these things that surrounded the ship at that same time. In fact, in a broader sense, in that same time period, 3 days in July of 2019, there were more than 100 of these objects that appeared around 9 U.S. Navy warships. They don't know what they are. It is a legitimate mystery that deserves to be investigated. I think that you probably could identify some of these things if you put some money and resources into it. The UAP task force that produced this report, they had 2 staff members, 2 part-time staff members who worked on it in a 6-month time period. Here you go, U.S. Navy, produce a story or a report that encapsulates 74 years of UFO information in a mere 6 months. So they put almost no resources at all and had no budget. The report that was just released to the public suggests we need to put some money into this, create an organization that acts as a central belly button, and force all these other government agencies to start cooperating.
Now we have a lot more information about the report, the videos, the incidents. All of it is at MysteryWire.com. Coming up on Politics Now.
The final 2 Supreme Court opinions of the term show just how much influence the conservative majority will have.
The final 2 Supreme Court opinions of the most recent term make it pretty clear how much influence the conservative majority will have on the high bench. Alex Limon has details on some of the most major rulings.
In a 6-3 opinion, the Supreme Court struck down California's requirement for charities and nonprofits to disclose the names of their top donors. Conservative and liberal groups opposed California's law, and the Supreme Court agreed California's requirement violated donors' First Amendment right.
These are organizations that are operating in the public domain that are actually advocating for public policy changes, and in some cases actually advocating for certain candidates.
Michael Cohen, CEO of Cohen Research Group and author of Modern Political Campaigns, says this case now opens the door for other lawsuits to directly challenge campaign finance laws. In another decision, the conservative justices also upheld 2 controversial voting laws in Arizona. One allows the state to throw out ballots cast in the wrong precinct. Another blocks third parties from collecting ballots.
A federal appeals court in San Francisco had blocked Arizona's laws, saying they disproportionately impact Black, Hispanic, and Native American voters.
But Justice Samuel Alito wrote that the state's interest in election integrity justify the measures. Democrats like Florida Congressman Darren Soto say Congress needs to pass new reforms.
The right to vote is under attack by state legislatures, by the Supreme Court, and we need to pass H.R. 1, the For the People Act, or at the very least pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
But the measures are unlikely to pass in the narrowly divided Senate. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Alexandra Limon joining us now to explain why the justices ruled that way. Alex, what are some of the larger repercussions that this ruling could have?
Hey there. Well, the conservative Supreme Court justices agreed with the groups that were challenging California's law, saying that forcing charities and nonprofits to disclose the names of their top donors could have a chilling effect and prevent those donors from making their donations. And the justices actually said that California's requirement was infringing on the First Amendment rights of those donors. However, on the flip side of that coin, it's important to note that both conservative groups like the Americans for Prosperity Foundation, as well as liberal groups like the ACLU, were opposed to California's law. And the reason for that is that it doesn't just necessarily impact straightforward groups that you would typically consider, a charity like the American Cancer Foundation. It impacts all sorts of nonprofits that sometimes, may fundraise for certain political causes, maybe even sometimes for political candidates. And so other groups who were supportive of California's law and political observers worry that this Supreme Court ruling may now make campaign finance laws or campaigns less transparent and actually open the door for a lot more lawsuits to come forward in the future, more directly, trying to fight campaign finance laws and challenge those laws because of this very ruling.
And Alex, in another major case, the Supreme Court upheld 2 controversial voting laws in Arizona. What made those laws so controversial?
Well, one of the reasons they were so controversial, and this ruling is a bit controversial, is that actually the lower federal court that last ruled on this case found that those Arizona voting laws disproportionately impacted Black, Hispanic, and Native American voters and were in violation of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And those laws in Arizona, they did two things. One is they allowed the state to throw out any ballots that were cast in the wrong precinct. But secondly, it also banned what the state of Arizona calls ballot harvesting. That's going to do a couple of things. For starters, states around the country, conservative states, could choose to take both of those exact same laws and implement them in their states because they know that they can no longer be challenged in court. That's already been settled. But it again also opens the door and emboldens those Republican or conservative legislators around the country that we've seen are currently trying to pass hundreds of different laws to restrict voting in various ways. It emboldens them to try to move forward even more so with those laws, with the hopes that the Supreme Court in the end would uphold those laws too.
Well, tomorrow is our Independence Day, so we want to wish all of you a happy 4th of July, of course. Now, there are a bunch of celebrations around Nevada. There's the Summerlin Patriotic Parade that was earlier today. The Boulder City Jamboree is also tomorrow. And after a year and a half of being locked in at home, everybody ready to celebrate. There are fireworks shows happening up and down the Strip, downtown Las Vegas, Henderson, Summerlin, and the rural corners of Clark County. Plenty of places to celebrate our nation's independence. We thank you very much for watching Politics Now. We'll see you next week. Take care of yourselves.